Cops are involved in a fatal Atlanta shooting that has the city in turmoil. Gorsuch and the Supreme Court libs have redefined sex. Cuomo threatens to shut down New York City again. Is travel from Mexico spiking COVID cases? And an insider tells us about life inside Seattle's Chaz. Coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Hope you had a good weekend. Thank you very much for joining. It is always an honor, a privilege, a pleasure. A lot of things happening, so the good news is we have much to get to today. The bad news is that most of it really is bad news. I wish I could tell you that there are going to be some victory dances today for the economy, for freedom, for law and order, but no. But we still have to get to what's gone on and work through it all. That's what we do here. That is our mission. That is our plan. So the first thing that I wanted to get to is this shooting that happened in Atlanta with Rayshard Brooks. Now, there's a lot of video of this, so there's not a lot of question about what happened here. I mean, there are some angles we may wish to see. Additionally, there are some components of this incident that we'll want to get greater clarity on. But overall, we understand what happened. And here are the basics of this in case you haven't had a chance to catch up with this over the weekend. Rayshard Brooks was found asleep in his car. He was found asleep in his car outside of a Wendy's in Atlanta. And there was a whole lot of video of law enforcement having what is a very, look, they're called because he was asleep and blocking his car, I believe was blocking traffic. So he'd fallen asleep in his car, blocking traffic. And there's all this video, body cam footage, surveillance camera footage of the cops going up to him. And it's a very professional exchange. The law enforcement officers are absolutely, there's two white male law enforcement officers. They are completely by the book, you could say. Everything is going as you'd want it to. They are speaking to him. They are speaking to him respectfully. And they're asking him about whether he wants to have whether he will take a test or not for being under the influence. You know, they want to see it essentially if he's a DUI. Now, the way it depends on state to state, where you're talking about. But generally speaking, if you are found, or I should say in some states, it's my understanding that if you're found in the driver's seat of a car and you have the keys in the car and you're drunk, that is considered a drunk driving risk and you can be arrested for that, right? That's my understanding. And again, this is getting into the details of different state statutes. I'm not sure exactly what it is in Atlanta in the state of Georgia, but I have a feeling that that's correct because the officers were then going to arrest him, right? So they place everything has proceeded, and there's audio, there's video of all of this. Everything has proceeded exactly as would be not just expected, but it was really textbook. And then Rayshard Brooks starts wrestling with the two officers and very quickly really overpowers. I mean, the guy's he admits that he's had a few drinks. He says it was top shelf stuff. I mean, whatever, and he goes, what does that mean? He goes, I don't know. So he's clearly a little drunk. He's able to overpower the two officers and get one of them pulls a stun gun to use on him. And they're saying, stop resisting. You're going to get tased. And when the officer goes to pull out the taser, the suspect in this case, now deceased, Brooks, grabs the taser and is wrestling with him now, wrestling with the officer. This is all happening on video. Then Brooks manages to get away from the two officers. So he is running away from them, but he has taken one of their tasers. He is running away. He's taking a taser. This is all on video. You can see it. And then he turns as the officers are yelling, stop, stop, stop. He turns and he very clearly pulls, and I believe, although it's tough to see this in the video, who definitely pulls and points the taser. I believe he actually tries to fire the taser at an officer. And an officer, the one whose taser had been taken, had drawn his service weapon and fired 3 shots. And he killed Rayshard Brooks with those 3 shots. Now, this is a much more complicated use of force situation and a much more defensible one from the officer's perspective, as in it is defensible. What happened to George Floyd was not. But this is a defensible use of force case. At a minimum, requires investigation and due process for the officers involved. Already fired. The officer's already fired, lost his job. So the police department has sent a signal that this was a bad shoot right off the bat. This is a bad shoot. The other officer, who was merely there and wrestling with this guy, has been put on leave. I'm assuming leave with pay. Otherwise, it would be a suspension. It's been put on leave while they investigate. But they already fired the first officer. They fired him. And now you have the district attorney saying there may be murder charges against that officer. Okay, well, let's unpack this a little bit. First of all, this is not like the George Floyd case. The only things that are the same in this case and the George Floyd case are you have a black suspect of a crime and a white law enforcement officer who used lethal force. The other details are massively different, and that's really important. There is no reason to believe at all that there was any racial animus in this incident. There is no reason to believe that these cops acted out of systemic racial hatred. In fact, the opposite is shown in the video. They are respectful and professional and polite to Rayshard Brooks. And Rayshard Brooks, for really no reason other than he decided he wasn't going to get arrested, starts wrestling 2 cops. Once you start resisting arrest, you are inherently escalating the force that will be used to subdue you, right? This is the first sin here. No question about it from the video. We have body cam footage. No question about it. The officers did this all by the book and were calmly about to effect an arrest for driving under the influence, and Rayshard Brooks tries to run and then wrestles with them and then steals a weapon. A taser is a weapon. It is a less lethal weapon or a non-lethal weapon, although it has caused, if you look at the ACLU has all these lawsuits and such, has raised all these concerns that it can cause heart failure for somebody. But it's clearly meant to be non-lethal. But here's the problem. If you're a law enforcement officer and you're carrying a service weapon on you, and someone can use a taser against you, which will be very painful and is meant to incapacitate you, it is a very short leap from I have just tased this cop. Remember, think of how many of you would be willing to wrestle a cop, take a weapon from a cop, and then use the weapon on the cop? I'm just talking about the taser now. I'm guessing none of you, because you're not criminal and not acting in a way that is insane and very reckless and very dangerous. So this guy had already done all of those things, used a taser on a law enforcement officer. Is our expectation, and this is the key question, this goes to the heart of all this, and we all know the politics around this right now, oh my gosh, it's toxic, you've got all these marches, and cops are horrible, and cops are the bad guys. That's what they're telling. That's what's being spouted at all these protests all the time. And they pretend, oh, no, it's just about reform, man. It's just about justice. Please, we're not idiots. We see what's going on. The key question here is, are we now, because the facts are really not in dispute about this, are we now going to expect law enforcement officers to get tased and incapacitated by a suspected criminal? And I'm wondering what we're going to find out about Mr. Rayshard Brooks's criminal history. Somehow this is never a part of the early discussion in incidents like this, but it would be in any criminal trial. It absolutely would be, and should be. And it's still amazing to me how little attention has been paid in the media to the speed with which they have punished this individual. The speed with which they have gone against this law enforcement officer means that there was no due process for him. There was no investigation. But are we now claiming that a cop has to allow himself or herself to be tasered and then hope that the criminal will not go up, take their gun, and execute them? Because cops do get killed. You do a quick Google search, you'll see it. It happens. It's one of the biggest threats that law enforcement officers face, actually, because they're expected to use less than lethal force when someone's resisting arrest. So as a cop, you've got a gun on you. It's loaded. You're already dealing with somebody who may be bigger, stronger, a better grappler, and they can escalate force. The bad guy can escalate force as fast as he or she chooses, right? The bad guy can decide, you know what? Yeah, I was just going to resist arrest, but now I'm going to bash this cop's head in with a rock. And it can happen in an instant. So now we're asking law enforcement to get tased, writhing around on the ground, maybe get tased again by the assailant here, and hope that the suspect, this person assaulted police officers, okay? They committed a crime. Forget about the DUI. That is illegal. That is a crime. I know right now you see all these protests. They're throwing rocks, sometimes Molotov cocktails. They're throwing rocks and trash cans. And this is now being normalized. Like you can just attack cops. No, that's a crime. It's a serious crime. So Rayshard Brooks attacked cops who were completely legitimate in the conduct of their duty up to the resisting of the arrest. No question about it. Watch the video. It's a textbook arrest. And now we're expecting the cops to say, yeah, fine, just tase me. And I hope you don't execute me and I never get to see my wife and kids again after this. I hope the person that was willing to attack cops and is drunk and who knows, maybe has got other drugs in his system. We don't know yet, friends. I hope that the cop, I hope that the criminal doesn't kill me. I also want to know now, does that mean that people can walk up to law enforcement officers, the bad guys, if they're running out of and this is a separate incident, but I just want to theorize this a little bit. If they're trying to, escape a bank robbery, are they allowed to shoot tasers at cops now that get in their way? Freeze. Oh, no, I'm just going for my taser. Don't worry, officer. I promise I won't kill you after you're on the ground, writhing around, incapacitated with 50,000 volts or whatever it is going through your system. Don't worry, officer. This is now, but we have a defund cops movement. We have cops are the bad people. Oh, that's right. There's a better way to do community policing. What are these officers supposed to do? The left is insane and destructive and cannot stop pandering and lying in its quest to achieve the power to dictate every aspect of your life under the false promise of creating a utopian society that simply will never exist. And in the process of getting us there, they will destroy the load-bearing walls of our own society. They will undermine our very foundations. Whatever the left has to do to get power, they will do. And if that means making law enforcement the bad guys in a country that has had declining rates of violent crime, a country where the cops have been winning, which benefits all of us. They've been winning for the last 30 years as a society, but they're not winning everywhere. There are some areas of the country where cops are still unable to get control of the criminal element. It's not their fault. And yet we think the answer is to make cops less able to do their jobs everywhere. This is wrong. It's vicious and it's evil. But you'll see Democrats, and I want to get more into, I actually think the media is the center of the greatest evils in the country. I actually think that that's real now. I've been thinking more and more about it. Scott Adams, who's a guy, I don't even know his work very well. He's on Twitter. I think he might have been a cartoonist. That's my understanding. He tweeted this out, and I saw this. I said, he's absolutely right. The media is really the center of the evil in all of this. They're creating false narratives and lies that people believe. Cops are not killing unarmed black men regularly for sport in this country. That is a lie. Anyone who says it is being reckless and is spreading hatred, is spreading fear. It's wrong. What happened in Atlanta is not what happened in Minnesota, and to conflate the two, to pretend that they're the same situation and should have the same outrage is dishonest, and that's wrong.
And I have people that verify they made their order. I'm here right at the hotel home lodge inn. It's probably about maybe 2 minutes away from here.
Did you understand what I asked you? Did you understand the question?
Repeat it again for me.
On a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being completely sober and 10 being very impaired, how do you feel?
I'm 10. I'm very impaired.
You feel very impaired?
Absolutely. I'm okay. I can do whatever. Like I said, I can make it happen, sir.
I don't think that means what you think it means. So 1 being completely sober, haven't drank anything, and 10 being hammered drunk, how do you feel?
I'm 1.
On a scale from 1 to 10.
I'm 1.
You feel completely sober.
Like I said, I just woke up.
You don't feel the effects of the alcohol that you had whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
Not
I can make it wherever I need to be. I'm right here. Like I said, I'm home lodge, sir.
Home lodge isn't close to here.
It's right behind the home lodge right here, ain't it?
Where do you think you are right now?
I'm on Old Dixie Highway.
You're not on Old Dixie Highway.
Well, I'm not on Old Dixie
What
Highway.
city do you think you're in?
She brought me here.
We have 9 pending, 1 car, 2, signal 35 and 17.
I was on Jonesboro.
I have a couple
So what city are you in?
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
On what road?
McDonough Boulevard.
No.
So you see, the officer here is establishing what in a court, and this is all on video and audio, would be beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, Rayshard Brooks. Now, this doesn't justify the use of force issue. I'm just saying that there was no animus here. They weren't This guy was clearly very drunk and planning on driving, which kills a lot of people all the time. So, unless we're going to say that now DUI is fine because social justice, the officers were right to be concerned here and to effect an arrest. Okay? So let's establish that. This isn't passing a forged $20 bill. This is somebody who's clearly wasted. Okay, the guy doesn't know where he is. He's clearly very drunk. He was in his car. He's telling officers, yeah, I'm just going to drive home. Don't worry, I'm fine. And they're going to arrest him. Now, so we've established everything the cops have done up to this point has been lawful, by the book, respectful as well. The whole thing, we have the whole audio body cam footage. And then Rayshard Brooks decides to fight 2 cops, to take a weapon from one of the cops and use the weapon on one of the cops. Now, it is not a lethal weapon, but neither is a baton until it is, right? Would you want an officer to get smacked in the face with a nightstick if someone's running at them? No. You got to take a few cracks on the skull from a person who's already assaulting officers. This is the real debate. What is acceptable use of force? Is it terrible that Rayshard Brooks died? Yeah, man, this guy shouldn't have died. But it's also not the cops' fault for defending themselves. And yes, they're going to say that he was shot. I've seen this. It's been ruled a homicide. He was shot 2 times in the back. Right, he was shot in the back. He had turned. It's all on video. He had turned and tried to use the taser on an officer as he was running away. Well, I mean, what is the expectation we have from cops here? Get tased. That's what we're telling them. Get tased and hope that the guy doesn't turn around. He's only, 10 or 15 feet away. Turn around and come get your gun. That's what the left, the Democrats, the media, that seems to be the standard. I think there's no question that the shooting in Atlanta is going to energize the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that's quite clear. It already has resulted in the Wendy's, where the shooting happened, being looted and destroyed. Well, destroyed. I shouldn't say looted. I'm being riots completely ruined it. I think it was burnt out, but yeah, they destroyed the Wendy's, and there was some other violence and riots in Atlanta. You never hear much media coverage of that, do you? you never really see what happens when the stuff is bad. There were riots in Atlanta, and yet there's not much media coverage of it, which I think is very interesting, isn't it? But wouldn't that be, rioters burn Atlanta Wendy's to the ground following the death of Rayshard Brooks. I believe it was not that this, it only matters insofar as the left determines that there are certain people who need to suffer for our collective sins. And generally that doesn't include minority business owners. But I believe this was a minority-owned Wendy's franchise. So, you would think that people, would understand at this point the media is in fact the enemy of the people. The media is taking an approach where whatever they can do to make Americans angry at each other, frightened, scared, and the enemy is anyone who does not go along with this. Right? Anyone who says, wait, hold on a second. Why are you pretending that cops are racist murderers? It's not just for ratings. There are other ways to get ratings. Why are you pretending that there hasn't been a tremendous amount of racial progress in this country? And it's something that Americans should look on with pride. That we've come to a place now where every American I know is not a racist. Isn't that a nice thing to be able to say, be able to think about? And, oh, wow, look at this. This is the country we live in. And as that has happened, as we have reached this point, and I know that you could say that that's anecdotal, but that's quite a statement to make then from the left that we're living in a place of systemic racism. I mean, Larry Kudlow, God bless him, was willing to say, I don't see this as a country where there's systemic racism, where the system is producing on purpose racist outcomes. In fact, the only intentional racial disparity in law, this is a fact, is meant to elevate and assist specific non-white minorities through affirmative action and other programs. That is the only place. This is a fact. This is the only place as a matter of law that there are racially discriminatory outcomes, and it is to the benefit of racial minorities. People can try to argue that, but there is no other place in law you could point to. And we will discuss the big Supreme Court ruling that came down which I think is the wrong ruling, and is going to set up a whole lot of problems for Catholic affiliated institutions going forward. And really, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So now we have another round of we're going to have the public mourning. We're going to have, I'm sure, what'll look like state funerals for Rayshard Brooks, and there will be more angry riots. Protests happen here in New York. I heard them over the weekend. If people really want, although put aside the fact that it's all spitting in the faces of everybody who's had their business shut down, who's been told to stay indoors, who's been having their rights trampled on for months because of social distancing. Just put aside that. We'll get to that in a little bit. But people want to protest and they want to walk around and chant, and fine. They can do that all day long. I don't care. Right? I mean, but when they violate the law and people make excuses for that and say, well, it's a mostly peaceful protest. Okay. What about the non-peaceful part? Why do we excuse this behavior? Why do we accept this? And remember that the activist Antifa types, the people that are destroying and attacking cops, they get much more attention for the overall movement. They're serving a purpose for the movement. There is no cost that is paid by the movement, whether it's Black Lives Matter or now I think we could think of it more broadly. I mean, this is just the mobilized left. Black Lives Matter is the vanguard of this broader movement. But over the weekend here in New York, there was a huge Black Trans Lives Matter movement. Now, put aside for a moment the Supreme Court case that dealt with LGBT issues, I would just note that I am not aware right now of a single case of an unarmed Black transgender individual who has been killed by cops. So I thought this was all about police violence and the state and systemic racism. But now there are other protests that are happening under the aegis of the movement. So this is what I've told you, and you're seeing it, and there's no real way for them to. I mean, they'll ignore what I'm saying, they'll pretend it's not true, but it is very clear that this movement is about the broad-scale mobilization of the forces of the far left that run the Democratic Party now, that are the Democratic Party. There are just some Democrats that give cover to this. You know, there's some Democrats that are, I'm a little more centrist, or, I need to get elected in Ohio or Michigan, so I'm not going to go on with all the most radical defund cops stuff. But sure enough, the movement, such as it is growing, and we are now understanding, we're seeing more clearly than ever that this is effectively an anti-Trump movement meant to seize power. And they will lie about things. They will misrepresent. They will destroy. They will attack. They are ruining. I mean, the left is ruining New York City. And I know for a lot of you have a hard time crying any big tears for New York, but just remember that this is the largest metropolitan area in the United States. There's an enormous amount of wealth and power concentrated here, and it affects so much of the rest of the nation when it comes to media coverage, when it comes to corporate policy, when it comes, you may live in Oklahoma, but what people in fancy offices, but no one's really in their offices these days, but what people in the C-suite in New York City are deciding about policy, about the statements they're going to put out about cops and all the rest, affects you wherever you are. There is a spread of this from the city, and New York is being ruined right now. I mean, this place is going to end up being a shell of its former self, and I'll get into some more of the reasons why that's happening. But for right now, I've just got to tell you, I am so angry at what we see from the mainstream media day in and day out, and I have been for a long time. But they're reckless. I mean, they're reckless beyond words. They don't care about the damage that they're doing to people's lives. There was quite an exchange between Jenna Ellis, who is a lawyer affiliated with the Trump campaign, and Brian Stelter, who is, I would say he's like the court jester of CNN, except he's not funny. He's really a sad and pathetic and deeply insecure little man. And for whatever reason, Jeff Zucker has platformed him in this way where we're supposed to listen to this whiny-voiced clown. Again, clowns are funny, though, so that's not even a good term for him. I don't know. And I don't know the man. I've seen his work once or twice. He's not talented. He's not good at television. He's not particularly bright. But here he is with Jenna Ellis, and she makes a very important point here that I've been making many times. Play clip 6.
Someday you're going to regret this when your kids and your grandkids look back at this time and you use slurs and smears like fake news to hurt news outlets. No, but it's,
Brian,
Jenna,
you can't even come on.
I think in 10 or 20 years, if we just sit down and talk about this, you're going to recognize how damaging it was. How damaging it was to use terms like fake news, to attack journalists who were trying to do their jobs.
In 15 or 20 years, you're not trying to do your job. You're not a journalist, Brian. You're an activist. That's the problem. You have an agenda, and your agenda is anti-Trump. The American people see through that, and they are very grateful that this president is finally holding the fake news media accountable, because you're activists. You're not reporting fact and truth. You won't even say that as a general
the reason why I think it's helpful to have these conversations
shouldn't ever appear in a media outlet.
Folks have gotten used to these alternative realities, and I think it's important we see there are alternative realities.
There's alternative realities out there, that's for sure.
Like CNN putting this complete joke on television. Jenna Ellis is right. Stelter is not a journalist. He's an activist. That's true. CNN is an activist organization. It is effectively an unregulated pack of the DNC. That's what CNN has become. But more than that, very troubling things are happening in this country. And people like Stelter and all the other anchors over at CNN are a bunch of narcissistic frauds who won't speak the truth about what is actually happening and instead just create narratives. I mean, I used to think that it was them reflecting back to the audience what their audience wants to see. But really what's happening is they are directing the narrative. They are at the front of the riot, so to speak. Go burn this. Go attack this. Go destroy this, because they're creating the rage and the anger and they're directing it. as it goes along. And they're not calling it out. They're not calling it out when it comes to this anti-cop hysteria. And they're certainly not calling it out when it comes to the double standards over COVID, which conservatives, my friends, I don't know what it's going to take for us. I thought we cared about liberty. I thought we were the individual rights and freedom matter ideology. And we're just going to get dictated to by these morons in state capitals all across the country. We're going to have people telling us. And now for some of you, I know you're saying, well, Buck, things are so much better in my state. It's not 100% better. Go fly on an airplane. We got a long way to go here because the lockdown libs see political benefit in the destruction, in the violence, in the undermining of our very society. The lockdown libs, the left, the Biden voters, that's right, these are Democrats, they see benefit in this pain and suffering and economic loss and authoritarianism and despair and psychological duress. All these things that are happening in the country right now, the lockdown libs are fueling the fire. They like it. They want to push it because then they think they'll be able to convince just enough people that Joe Biden will be our savior. They're appalling. They are appalling. I actually think these people are contemptible human beings who are pushing these narratives.
And you need to take it and you need to process it and you need to keep carrying forward with it every single day of your life. Because we don't get to determine when we're black and when we're trans.
Black Trans Lives Matter was the protest out in Brooklyn over the weekend, the demonstration, protest, whatever your preferred terminology is. There was video circulating with thousands and thousands of people in very close quarters. Now, someone's going to have to explain this to me, okay? We've gone through months of being told that crowds spread COVID-19. And the CNN anchors, you can run endless clips of them. Cuomo, do your part. Be a good person. Come on. You know, if you want us to get back out and lift, bro, you got to do your part. And that was the Fredo. That wasn't the governor. The governor talks a little bit more like this. You know, he's a little bit of a thug sometimes. But then he goes kind of down here. And he goes, okay, I'm going to talk like this. But then he goes up here to say, I'm going to shut down restaurants. Don't make me come down there. Like it's also cute, fun, and games with the destruction that's been going on here. They are stealing months of our lives. They are stealing people's ability to have funerals and have weddings and to have these milestones, to have graduations. They've taken that from us. Oh, but when Black Trans Lives Matter wants to have a protest, do you think that any of the Democrat politicians out there who have been so quick to judge and demand and declare for months, because if you want to take additional risk, that's not allowed. COVID-19 means you're killing old people if you go outside and gather. Do you think any of them had words like that to say about what happened over the weekend in not just in Brooklyn? There were protests here. I heard the protesters walking past my apartment once again. No, of course not. Of course not. What are we to make of this? They don't really care, you see. That's the problem. We've caught them. As I said we would. I told you we will go to a phase where the moment the left wants there to be gatherings, they will just ignore those gatherings and the risk that they pose from COVID-19. And then the second that they don't like the notion of gatherings, Trump rallies coming to you later this week, the moment that all of a sudden it's not in their political interest, they start abusing. You know, they have these little pet epidemiologists that will come out and say, "Oh, well, I'm an epidemiologist and I think that this is really dangerous." Somehow, the only epidemiologists you ever hear from are like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton donors. Those are the only ones that you ever see in public, right? I know plenty of doctors who are like, "Look, this is a threat to old people. We can manage this. This is something that society should not shut down for again. We shut down too long in the first place. We can push through this. We should push through this." I know plenty of doctors who will say that privately. But, oh, my gosh, if they come out publicly, the lockdown libs, the cancel left, all of a sudden, they come for you. The doctors have made a mockery of themselves in recent weeks, the ones who have come out and made claims on this. Oh, all of a sudden, COVID-19 isn't really... They're going to tell us that there's a peak in cases before the Trump rallies happen, and they're not going to associate the peak. And I would also tell you that I've looked at the numbers very closely. These are very small upticks in states where they've had a very overall low number of hospitalizations and deaths from this. But they're doing it because they're trying to put pressure on the Trump rallies, and they're just going to forget all about the massive thousands and thousands of person protests that have been occurring. And they're going to pretend like that's not an enormous, assuming that you think that social distancing is still necessary, which I do not, except in specified circumstances indoors and around people who are at high risk, which would be true of the flu as well. I would not go and visit elderly relatives if I thought it was possible that I had contracted flu and it was during the flu season. I would stay away. So it's really not that different from the world that we have been living in all along. No, this is different because they say you can't gather outdoors and you must always wear a mask. Unless you're a leftist, then you can do whatever you want. Burn down a building, go riot, do whatever you want, social justice.